Hello, this is John from caveofprogramming.com, and in this tutorial we're going to write the code that we need to send emails from Java. So I've linked in the relevant jar files as described in the last tutorial, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a properties object, and I'm going to use this properties object to specify which SMTP server I want to use. So let's say here props equals new properties, and this is the standard Java properties class that represents key value pairs. So it's Java util.properties, and I'm going to set some properties here. So I'm going to say props.setProperty, and I'm going to set 3 properties here, and you might need to set different properties or more properties or less or whatever, depending upon the details of your server. But now let's take a look at an example. So if I go to Google, let's say, and I search for Java Mail properties, you can find some API documentation, and I'm not sure if this is a good page or not. Yeah, here we go. And this is a list of the properties that you can set, and the first thing I need to set here is the host, because I need to tell Java what my SMTP host is. So I'll go back to Eclipse and I'll say here mail.host, and to find out what the name of my host is, I'm going to consult the documentation for my email host provider, which is let's see, it's somewhere here, and my provider tells me that I've got this server mail.caveofprogramming.com. So that's my host, and please don't use these same values in your own programs. Please change them, otherwise I'll get my servers will get spammed. So I'm going to set mail.host to mail.caveofprogramming.com, and now I also need to set the port. So if I go back to this properties list here, I need to set mail.protocol.port, and where the documentation says protocol in italics, I'm going to change that for SMTP, which is the protocol I want to use, because my mail server here supports the SMTP protocol. So I'll paste that in there. I'll change that to SMTP, and the port that I need I'm going to get from my mail provider again, and it's port 26 in this case. So let's set 26 here in double quotes because it's a string. And finally, I couldn't find documentation for this, but I found this by some Googling. You may need to set mail.auth, mail.protocol, so SMTP.auth, and set that equal to true. And that seems to somehow help and stop you getting strange messages about not being authenticated from your server. So that's all the properties I need to set for this example, and now I need to set authentication details, and I've got password and user authentication set up here on this SMTP server, or rather it was set up for me. I set a password for it and a username, and to supply that information I'm going to create another object. I'm going to create an authenticator object, and I'm going to say auth equals new authenticator, and I need to override a method of this. It's only actually got one method, so authenticator, and I think that's right. And but I'm just going to use an anonymous class here to override the method. I could have some class which extends authenticator and do it that way. Let's have the input there, Control-Shift-O, and in fact I've got the wrong one imported there, so let's try that again. And I need to add javax.mail.authenticator, so now we've got the right one. And I'm going to click in here and just override this method. I'm going to go to Source, Override Implement Methods, Get Password Authentication. And from this method here, so I'm just using an anonymous class syntax for extending this class here, if it is a class, or implementing the interface, if it is an interface. I'm not completely sure. And now I need to return here a password authentication object. So I'm going to say return new password authentication, and I'm going to supply there my username and password. And now my username, again, if I look at my documentation, my username for my SMTP server is going to be this. Actually, I'm going to change this slightly because I want to use a slightly different account for this tutorial. So I'm going to say I'm going to use this username, and I set a password on it temporarily for the purposes of this tutorial to hello, which you should never set on a real live kind of server, of course, because someone will hack into it. And please don't hack into my server. And now, once you've got that information, you can create a session object. And this session object is not the kind of session, it's not the same session class that we've used in servlet programming. It's a different one, and I'm going to add the input there, Control-Shift-O. It's javax.mail.session, not org Apache Catalina session. So if you want to use both sessions in the same scope, then you'd have to prefix the type with the full package string, of course. And I'm going to set that equal to session.getDefaultInstance, and I'm going to pass that my properties and my authentication. Now, this is how you would do this for like a vanilla SMTP server, but it may be that if you have an application, if you have an account with some application server somewhere, for example CloudBees, then in CloudBees there's this thing that you can set up. Like if I log in here, I think I am logged in, you can go to more services, and they have a send grid which allows you to send emails. And if you go to the documentation for that, in fact you'll find that they allow you to get the session object in a similar way to how you get the data source, if you've seen the tutorial on creating a data source for getting a database connection. And they supply you code on how to get that session, and they've got some sample codes here of how to use it, and there's also an alternative method here, and there's some XML that you have to configure. So if your email server provider gives you different instructions, and of course follow those, but the stuff, once you've got the kind of session object here, then the rest is probably going to be the same regardless. So from now on, it's pretty much the same for any kind of server, as far as I know. Once you've got your session, you can use it to send emails, as many as you like, although of course your account may have a limit, and of course please don't spam people, especially not me. But I'm going to create one message here as an example. I'm going to say message msg equals new mime message, and I'm going to pass that session. So when you create message objects, you need to pass the session in there. Let's add the import javax.mail.message there with Control-Shift-O. And now I can configure the things that you'd expect to configure on a message, really. So there's probably nothing unexpected here. First I'm going to set the subject. So I'll say message.setSubject, and I'll say cave of programming. Let's say validate your account, for example. Validate your account. So if we imagine we want to check that a user's email account that they've entered is a valid account, we could send them a message with a link on it, and they click on the link and it goes to one of your servlets, and that servlet checks the parameters on the link, checks the username from the link, let's say, and sets some flag in the database to verify it's a real email message. And let's just handle the exception there, surround with try catch. And of course, if this was a servlet, if you can't send your email, you probably would want to just log the fact in a log file somewhere, or in your database in a log table, let's say, and then take the user to the next page, because there's no use usually telling the user that the email hasn't been sent. Just log the fact and then look at your log file regularly. Okay, so let's set message.setText, let's say, and you can supply attachments as well, but I'm not going to cover that in this tutorial. Let's just set some text here saying please click this link, and we could give them a link like, for example, http www.caveofprogramming.com/verify and a question mark, and we could give them a supply username here, like someone, I don't know, and so on. That'll do. And I also need to set who this message is from. I'm going to say message.set from. I think I need, yeah. And this takes an internet address object. So I'll say internet address, and I'm going to supply here the address that I want to send it from, which is going to be test2@caveofprogramming.com in my case. And you can also supply a friendly name here, and it could be that your server's set up so that this must correspond to the user account to prevent people sending emails that appear to come from fake email addresses, or maybe not, I don't know, it depends. And let's do Control-Shift-O to have the input for that, and it's just, I'm just going to handle this exception. So I'll say add exception to existing catch clause, and oh yeah, this is the kind of Java multi exception type syntax, which I guess will do fine for the moment. And I'll also say message.set recipient, very important. And the first field of this is a static field on message. It's message.recipient type dot, and then you can set blind copy or to. So I'm just going to send it directly to someone here, and I'm going to send this to webmaster@caveofprogramming.com, like this. And let's see if I've got maybe another exception here. Oh yeah, actually this needs to be a new internet address as well, so new internet address, and I won't set any kind of friendly name here. I'll just set the email address that I need to set. Okay, and let's just put a message down here like sysout finished, so we can see that the program's run okay. And I'll save that. And there's one last thing that I forgot, which is the most important bit, which I have to now put in. I actually have to send the message. So I'm going to say here, we use the transport class, transport.send, and just pass that the message. And now, if everything's right, let's save that, we can actually send this message. So let's click run, and if you do get any error messages, probably obviously double check everything, double check all your settings, and you can always Google, paste the error message into Google along with the word Java mail perhaps, and see what comes up, and hopefully you'll be able to fix them. Let's just run this and see. And it always feels to me a bit like a miracle if this works the first time, but I've tried this code before, so it should work. And yeah, we've run the program and there's no traceback here. And let's go to my the mailbox that I sent this to and just refresh it. And here's my message that I sent. And you can see it's got this link in it, which could be a link going to a server to verify a email account or something. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial. And of course, if you're working for a big corporation, this might not be much use, but if you're creating your own websites, it probably will be, because you probably want to send out like perhaps order confirmations or verify email addresses, or send people password reset emails or whatever you like. And so I'm not going to cover anything more now, but let's just very quickly review this. And if you've seen enough of this, then feel free to stop watching here. But basically, create a new properties object, set properties for your email provider, your email server, and you need to get that information from your email server provider's documentation. And you can find the properties that you need to set by looking up Java Mail properties, and you might need to set this mail.protocol.auth thing as well. Create an authenticator like this and override its method, password authentication method, to return a new password authentication with your username and password if you're using username and password authentication. And then finally you can create a session with the props and the authentication. And if you're using some application server on the internet, they might provide an alternative way using JNDI, let's say, to get that session. So you might be able to skip that and do something else instead. Finally, create a message and pass it the session. Set the subject text from recipient at the minimum, and your email addresses should be supplied in the form of internet address objects, and then finally call transport.send to send your message. And if you do get any problems, certainly Google them and hopefully you'll come up with an answer. Okay, so that's it for this tutorial, and until next time, happy coding.